Hey, it's Barry Mold, still trying to get your small business unstuck. And I'm here today with Gerri Detweiler. She's a credit expert and author from NAV who's helping small business owners get the PPP loans they need. Gerri, welcome to our little broadcast here.
Oh, thank you so much, Barry.
So one of the biggest confusions, now there's been a lot of confusion around PPP. I mean, what could go wrong when you put banks in between small business owners and their money? Nothing could possibly go wrong, right? But a lot of confusion around if I'm an independent contractor, I'm a sole proprietor, am I still eligible to apply for this PPP funding?
Yes, we've gotten so many questions about that. And it started with the question, do I include contractors in my payroll calculations? And then the SBA did come out with guidance that said, no, don't include 1099 contractors in your calculations because they can apply for PPP on their own. And they said you can do that starting April 10th, but April 10th came and went with no real specific guidance for those applicants. So we finally did get an update to the interim final rule, they call it at the SBA, that details.
I love that interim final rule.
Yes, and this is a supplement to the interim final rule. So, but it explains how someone who is self-employed, and specifically, this is how they're defining it, specifically someone who files IRS Form 1040 Schedule C for their taxes.
Right.
So that's what the definition is, how they apply for PPP.
So I think this is very important because a lot of people are confused. Do I apply as a business or do I apply as an individual? And again, my understanding is that if you have payroll in your company where you file a 940 or a 941 payroll tax thing, then you're just applying as a business. But if you don't, if you're a sole proprietor, independent contractor, where your income flows into your 1040, you don't file a separate tax return for your business, you should apply as an independent contractor and use Schedule C on the 1040. Is that correct?
That is my understanding as well. And I will add that I am not a tax pro or a
Neither am I.
CPA, and I know they have a lot of questions too. So just to clarify that, it's always a good idea to talk to your tax professional.
And then, so I'm on my Schedule C. What line am I looking at to figure out my payroll costs so I can take that annual, divide it by 12, and then multiply times 2.5?
That's another great question. So traditionally for PPP, you can base it on either the last 12 months or 2019, divided by 12 times 2.5. There's even a seasonal calculation. For self-employed who file Schedule C, the SBA is very specific. It is 2019. So you're taking the net profit, which is on line 31 of your Schedule C. You're dividing that by 12 to get the average monthly, and then you're multiplying that by 2.5 to get 2.5 times monthly payroll. Now, one question I get a lot, Barry, about this is, can I use PPP funds to pay myself? And the answer is yes. I mean, yes, you can be an employee of your business even if you don't run formal payroll. And that's what this particular guidance illustrates, is that it could be based on the net profit of your business. So I think that's really important for those who are self-employed and who are telling us, hey, I don't really pay myself a set salary. I just take money out of the business when I can or when I need it. This helps clarify that.
So what kind of documentation do I need to supply to the bank or the fintech lender? Do I need to show all my 1099s as proof of income, or is the tax return just enough?
Well, this is where it gets a little bit confusing. So the SBA is suggesting that you need to fill out your 2019 tax return. So even if you don't file it, you need to fill it out. And you are relying on that information for that calculation, so you need to get it correct. So if you are not working with a tax professional, or you have not done your, caught up in your, whatever your tax prep software is now.
Got 3 more months now.
You got the extension, but you can't use it. So you definitely need to do that. And then the second question is, you need to be able to prove that your business was in business by February 15th of this year. So for that, they're saying that documentation could include things like a 1099 miscellaneous, or it even says book of record. So,
whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that means. So you need something to substantiate that your business was in business and that, you were self-employed. But the lender primarily is going to be relying on your numbers that you give them to determine the loan amount. So they're not going to, as far as I know, they're not going to require an actual filed 2019 tax return, as is often the case with so many other types of SBA loans.
Right. And again, because it's intended the way the bill was written from Congress that this is self-certifying, right? And
Exactly.
they're not relying on any documentation. Well, do I have to actually show that my business has been impacted by this? What happens if my business is okay, but the longer this goes on, I think it's going to go downhill.
Well, the language requires you to self-certify that due to economic uncertainty, these funds are required.
Right.
So I can't interpret how the SBA is going to come back and look at that later, but it's pretty clear that it's talking about economic uncertainty due to COVID. It's not saying that you lost X amount of revenue or anything like that. And I know there's a lot of businesses who are saying, you know what, I'm getting paid for last month's work or for
Exactly.
the past 2 months work, but I'm not convinced I'm going to get
Right.
paid for my next work. And that's where this could be very helpful to them.
And surveys show that 95% of small business owners have been affected one way or another because everything is rolling downhill. One of the other questions that a lot of people have is, can I apply for multiple businesses? This whole idea of affiliation, maybe I have my hand in a bunch of different things.
Yes, I wrote a whole article about that, and I tried not to be too. I tried not to draw too specific conclusions. But the SBA, does have rules where they're determining if you're a small business. It's often based on size. Sometimes it's based on revenues for businesses larger than 500 employees. And what they require you to do is include everybody who owns 20% or more in your business in the application, and then they can combine all those under affiliation rules to determine if your business still qualifies. And so if you do have multiple businesses and together those would be larger than 500 employees, I would definitely get some advice. Or if you have a business partner and together the affiliated businesses, would constitute what's no longer a small business, I would recommend getting some advice. The one thing I couldn't find a clear answer to, Barry, is whether that raises the total aggregate amount of all SBA funding above the $10 million that's available in this program. Typically, the SBA and the 7A program, they limit all loans by affiliates to $5 million. In this one, where it's $10 million, and it says you have to pay attention to affiliation rules for size determination or eligibility, but it doesn't say in terms of loan amount. So it gets a little bit murky there.
I think the last question that people are really confused about is, can I actually apply from two different companies, right? So let's say I have two different companies that are kind of affiliated, but I run them as two separate corporations. Can they both apply even though they have the same ownership?
Yeah, and that's where it appears that you can, as long as you don't bump up against these size
500.
standards.
Right.
So it appears that that would be the
Right.
case. But again,
Right.
if you think that might apply to you,
Right.
get some good
Get
advice.
And so can an independent contractor, sole proprietor, can they apply for the economic injury disaster loan, which now I think is capped at $25,000? Does that apply to them or not?
They could apply for the EIDL. However, as of today, April 16th, they have closed all new applications due to lack of funding. We hope that Congress will appropriate more funds for that program. But yes, that program is available to sole proprietors and 1099 contractors. And sometimes it's a complement to the PPP. So the EIDL allows you to use the funds for working capital. So maybe you use that to pay that rent that you can't get covered in full by PPP. So these two could be complementary. We're hoping that Congress will work quickly to authorize more funds so they can open that up again. But it's certainly been very popular and hopefully will help some small business owners.
Well, Gerri, thanks for all the answers. Where can people learn more information about what you're doing with NAV?
They can go to nav.com, and we do have a free PPP calculator that lets them helps them understand how much they may qualify for. Over 95,000 small business owners have used that calculator to date.
Gerri, thanks again and stay safe.
You too.